Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear delegates. I am Karen Bucher, the project manager of a new initiative announced by Dr. Monique Eloi at the previous general session called the Observatory project. This project offers the opportunity for both organizations, the OIE and OECD, to work together in the framework of our agreement signed in 2016. Céline stressed that international organizations must work with their members to gain better knowledge about the implementation of their instruments. The Observatory project is addressing this issue. Let's start my explanation. The OIE contributes to a fairer rules-based trading system by supporting harmonization of international rules related to animal health and welfare and public health. The standards developed by the OIE aim to build good governance of the national animal health system and also to ensure the safety of the international trade while avoiding unjustified sanitary barriers. How does the OIE contribute to establish trust in the multilateral trade system? First of all, the OIE has developed robust methods to define relevant standards by working with transparency and inclusiveness based on science and consensus. Then, to support the implementation of these standards, the OIE has developed the PVS pathway, a global program for assessing on request a country's compliance with OIE standards on the quality of veterinary services. This is an important foundation for supporting international harmonization. Besides, the OIE organizes regular training activities on implementation of its standards. In addition, the OIE has developed mechanism to establish trust between trading partners by sharing information on animal health situation. At first, WISE, based on notification of all members countries, provides data on animal disease in real time. Secondly, the procedure for the official recognition of disease status by the OIE, applied currently for 6 diseases on a voluntary basis. It is a robust process to gain trust of trading partners. And thirdly, self-declaration of disease freedom under the responsibility of the delegates for all the other diseases is another way to provide sanitary guarantees for trading partners. Despite all the efforts already made, countries are facing a number of challenges associated with the national implementation of OIE standards, particularly when making decisions on the importation of animals and animal products. The technical item yesterday pointed out the need to build trust, to increase transparency, and to encourage member countries to implement OIE standards. But while countries need to consider most systematically OIE standards in their national legislation and decision-making, they also need assurance that these standards are continuously relevant and fit for purpose. That's why the OIE has launched an initiative to develop a new mechanism of monitoring and evaluation called the Observatory in order to encourage the use of OIE standards. This observatory will be a new mechanism composed of 3 stages. The first stage is monitoring. It means collection of information on the implementation of OIE standards by member countries. The second stage is analysis in order to have a greater understanding of challenges to the implementation and to evaluate the effectiveness and the practicability of OIE standards. The third stage is strategy. It means that the outcomes of the analysis will enable to enhance the standard setting process, to propose tools to help member countries to overcome the identified challenges, and also to measure the impact of OIE and donors' investments in capacity building activities. The design of the observatory is still at the early stage because it is a challenging project. The first challenge is related to the monitoring. What are the relevant data to monitor? Before answering this question, we need to characterize the concept of implementation. It is not just a copy-paste in national legislation. As it was pointed yesterday by Dr. Sarakan, it involves complex concepts such as risk analysis or equivalence. Other questions are these data available, accessible? How to collect this data? To find answers to these questions, we will have to identify different forms of engagement with stakeholders, to integrate the observatory with the existing mechanism in order to limit additional burden for members, and finally, to define a confidentiality policy. Once we have collected the data, the next challenge will be to analyze this data with a robust method, taking into account different factors such as the level of development, regional specificities. We will have to define criteria to evaluate these standards: relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, practicability. The analysis based on evidence will be able to provide an overall level of implementation of OIE standards and to identify difficulties with implementation. Finally, the OIE will have to uptake the results of this analysis and to propose solutions for members at national, regional, and international level. These solutions may be to provide guidelines, to facilitate the interpretation of these standards, to modify standards because difficult to implement or unfit for purpose, or to propose targeted capacity building activities. For this stage, the OIE will have to coordinate its action with the other international organizations. From the perspective of the member countries, how can they contribute to establish trust in the multilateral trade system? At national level, member countries are encouraged to use more systematically international standards when setting national legislation, to promote transparency through consultation of stakeholders at the different stages of regulatory process, to communicate on animal health management policy, to publish sanitary measures and make them available on a national website, to review and evaluate national legislation, to identify difficulties, and also to take into account the updating of OIE standards. At international level, member countries are encouraged to take part actively in international standard setting process by setting strong national position and, if possible, regional position based on consultation, to notify draft sanitary measures to WTO, to notify sanitary events to WISE, to submit an application for an official disease status, to make a self-declaration of disease freedom, which is published on the OIE website, and finally, to share information on capacity of veterinary services, in particular by the publication of PVRS reports on the OIE website. To conclude this presentation, these visuals illustrate the life cycle of the OIE standards in the future. The OIE is encouraging countries to be transparent with their national sanitary system through which OIE standards are implemented. More transparency means more and better data on national implementation, easier to monitor and easier to evaluate. It will enable to define better standards and by this way to encourage their use. Better implementation means more harmonization and therefore, as pointed by Céline out, lower cost and more economic opportunities. The OIE Observatory is expected to contribute to the progressive international harmonization of national sanitary rules applied to international trade. This will result in benefits for the OIE, member countries, private sector, civil society, and donors. By this way, the Observatory will contribute to establish trust in the multilateral trade system. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.